In this video, you're going to learn how to install Docker and verify that it's working. We'll be doing this on a Mac, but it'll be very similar if you're on Windows, as on both platforms you use Docker Desktop. If you're on Linux, we'll show you where the instructions are for installing it on various distributions. However, regardless of which operating system you're on, the verification steps will be the same.
So, we'll start by going to the Docker website, which is docs.docker.com, and then it'll look a bit like this. Let's make it a little bit bigger, and we'll just click on Get Docker. So you can see there are three sections for Mac, for Windows, and for Linux. We're first going to have a look at what it looks like to install it on Linux. So you can see that there are instructions for various different distributions, from CentOS or Debian and Ubuntu. Let's have a look at Ubuntu because that's one of the most popular. And you can see the Docker website has quite detailed instructions of how to install it with apt. But let's go back and download Docker for Mac and get it installed. So there's a link when we hit there to download it from Docker Hub, and then there's some requirements. I'm on quite a modern computer, so I'm quite sure that mine meets those requirements. This takes us over to Docker Hub, where we can click that Get Docker, and then it'll get downloaded. So you should have a docker.dmg. We're just going to double click that, and then just follow the normal steps for installing any application on a Mac. So we'll just drag it over there. And then once that's happened, we should end up with a new icon in our menu bar. It might take a little while to start, but eventually we'll have a little Docker is running and a green circle. You can see one of the options is Kubernetes, and we're going to use this same mechanism to use Kubernetes. So let's just jump into the preferences, and we're going to have a quick look at the resources. So here we decide how many CPUs and how much memory to give to Docker. For this course, I suggest upping this a little bit. 8 CPUs and maybe 4 to 6 gigabytes of RAM should do it. You also have the option to enable Kubernetes, but I wouldn't do that just yet. So now that we've got Docker installed, it's time to jump to the command line and verify that it works. So the first thing we're going to do is run docker ps. And because we've just installed Docker, unsurprisingly there are no containers. So why don't we start our first container? Well, first just run the Docker commands, and that'll give us all of our options. So you can see Docker has quite a lot more than we've shown so far. To run our first container, we can run docker run, and we're going to run the Ubuntu latest image. So all we do there is print echo world, but that command hasn't been run on our laptop, it's been run inside a container. So the next thing we're going to do is execute the same image, so Ubuntu latest, but we're going to execute bash inside it. To do that, we use the run -it option, the same image name, and then we're going to execute bash. So now we've got an interactive shell inside that container, and we can run echo hello world or hello from a container in there. Now to prove that that container is still running, we can open up a new tab, and then we can run docker ps. And that's going to show one container, and that's the container that's running in the other pane. And we can even actually get the logs from that container. So if we run docker logs, and then the name of the container, we haven't provided a name this time, so Docker has generated a default name, which can get quite funny. In this example, it's Friendly Sanderson. So the last thing we're going to do is kill our container. So rather than exit the left pane, we're actually going to run docker kill, and then the name of the container again. And we can see that on the left, our container's ended. So we're no longer running bash inside the container because the container's been killed. So we're now quite certain that Docker's working, so we've verified our installation. Let's just pop back to the presentation and learn a few more things about how Docker works on Mac and Windows.
One thing to note about running Docker on Mac and Windows is because Docker containers use Linux features, they can't actually run directly on our computers. What's actually happening is Docker Desktop is creating a small virtualization layer with Linux in. Don't worry about this too much for now. Most of the time, the fact that this virtualization layer exists is made transparent to you, but it's good to keep in mind for later in the course. That's it for this video. Next up, we're going to be getting some sample projects, we'll be learning how to build Docker images with Gradle. So see you in the next video.